About a month ago, I sat here on this very channel saying that it didn't matter who began the season at quarterback for the Eagles, that they would begin 3-1 regardless. If Carson Wentz played, Nick Foles played, hell, even if it was Nate Sudfeld. I stand by that statement. And I will go as far as to say that even if Nick Foles still stinks the first month, they will still go 3-1. So let's get into Nick Foles. And I'm just going to kind of just get into some things. And we'll kind of see how this goes. All right? Okay. All right. I wanted to start this off with a Zach Berman tweet. And I actually agree with this. So Zach Berman, about Nick Foles, he goes, "My Nick Foles thought, haven't you seen this before? He has a higher variance between outstanding and ugly than any other player I've covered. He has 18 starts, including the playoffs, with a quarterback rating over 100. He has 16 starts with a quarterback rating less than 80. He has only 8 starts in between." Okay, now, I don't have any statistics to back up what I'm about to say, but it's merely an observation, and we'll see if you guys agree. I think that Nick Foles needs an offensive line more than any quarterback I've ever seen. And that's not a shot at Nick Foles at all. Here's what I mean by that, okay? So with Nick Foles, if your O-line stinks and you collapse the pocket and you make him work the pocket and you make Nick Foles think and you make him backpedal and you make him sail the ball off his back foot, that's the bad Nick Foles. But you get that Nick Foles when your offensive line stinks. Nick Foles has success with the RPO because it allows him to get into a rhythm. A rhythm meaning he's not thinking when he's playing. When the offensive line stinks, he has to think. He has to navigate through trash. He has to navigate the pocket. He has to keep his eyes downfield, lock onto receivers. He has to process all these things very quickly. When he has to process, he struggles. We see the bad, poor games. When the offensive line does what they did in the playoffs, only 2 sacks allowed, Nick Foles RPOs. So he's getting into a rhythm off the RPOs. He's got all the time in the world in the pocket. Doesn't have to think because he doesn't have to worry about trash around him. The best example I can give you of Nick Foles in regards to another quarterback is Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner, I thought, was the same thing. Now, they didn't run any RPOs there in St. Louis or anything, but he would get into rhythms by simply taking quick 3-step drops and being pinpoint accurate with his throws, his quick slants, whatever it was, to Isaac Bruce and Torrey Hall. And obviously that St. Louis offensive line pretty damn stout when you got a guy in Orlando Pace as your left tackle, Hall of Fame left tackle. And you got a guy here in Philly, Jason Peters. But let's get back to this. All right. So why did I bring up Warner? 04, 03, 04, 05-ish when he's in New York, O-line struggled. It wasn't that good, and he stunk. Nick Foles is kind of like Kurt Warner. 2013, the year he had 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. If I remember correctly, the offensive line was very good. The year after, it wasn't as good, and I believe there was a lot of injury. I could be wrong, though. I will have to look that up. The injuries may have occurred the year after. But I'm curious to see on those quarterback ratings that are less than 80 how poor his O-line played in those games. And maybe this is something I will do at some point. I don't know. But I think there's something to this. And by the way, again, this is not a shot at Nick Foles. Kurt Warner is in the Hall of Fame, all right? Kurt Warner is in the Hall of Fame. Arizona and St. Louis. Quick 3-step drops when he can get into the rhythm. He can be deadly accurate. I remember there was a playoff game against the Packers where Kurt Warner, I believe it was like that 52-something game, that crazy game. Might have been 2010, I want to say. And he only had like 3 or 4 incompletions the entire game. So going back to Nicky Six, get the O-line. You allow him to build the rhythm with the RPOs. Allow him not to think when he's playing. That is when he's at his best. And obviously RPOs, again, that's something we haven't seen the preseason. So we're going to see them implemented in the regular season. And, you know, another narrative that I see a lot of people take is, you know, people will how do I word this? They will look down upon Nick Foles because he's an RPO quarterback. Just because he's an RPO quarterback doesn't mean he's not talented. We are taught as a football fan to, you know, we've been taught and trained that the traditional way of quarterbacking is the way to go, right? Well, with Nick Foles, that's not the way he is. He's an RPO guy. He's not about reading defenses, going through his receivers, going through his progressions. No, he's playing a different style of football. So he's in a system that, okay, it caters to his strengths, but that you shouldn't look down upon him just because he's in an RPO system. You know, if you have a guy like, say, Peyton Manning, you're not going to put him in a read option system now, are you? No, you're going to keep him where he is. He's a traditional quarterback. So, you know, don't kind of look down upon it just because, like, Deshaun Watson is more of like a RPO kind of guy. And he, you know, when he entered the league, he was only reading half the field. He's not really a traditional quarterback right now, but there's a lot of people who love Deshaun Watson. There are. So this traditional way of quarterbacking, I think, you know, people are like, well, he can't read the field. He can't do this. He can't do that. He just has strengths and weaknesses, and his strength is playing to the RPOs. Just a different style, just a different way of playing the quarterback position. Nothing wrong with it. That's all. All right. So the reason why I'm bringing up Nick Foles and all this, Peter King was on the Dan Patrick Show, and I probably should have brought this up a lot sooner. And he was talking about how he thinks, you know, Wentz is kind of doubtful for week 1. But let's kind of listen in to Peter King on the Dan Patrick Show. So here's some clips from it. Here, let's see if you guys can hear this.
Thursday night in Cleveland after the game, maybe 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes, and it in Cleveland feels like it just feels like I spent time with Doug Pederson Thursday night in Cleveland after the game, maybe 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes, and, you know, he is buttoned up tight on this one. He's not saying anything. He's not giving any clues. He said the same thing.
Okay, so he's buttoned up tight. He's not giving anything. He's not saying any clues. There's a couple things we can look at that. I mean, he's always been kind of like, you know, like that. But Doug, you know, he wants Atlanta to think that 2 quarterbacks are going to start. You have to prepare for both of them. That means more game planning, more hours, and, you know, yeah, more time you have to game plan for 2 quarterbacks, not knowing which one's actually going to start. So, of course, you know, Doug is going to be mum and not really say much. And obviously, we saw yesterday he got really pissed off because reporters, they kept trying to ask the same question. He kept getting the same answer. I mean, when he's cleared, he's cleared. And that's what it is for Carson Wentz.
To me, basically, last Thursday night, as he did whatever day it was, July 10th or whatever, when I saw him in Tahoe at that golf tournament, it's the exact same thing. Look, yes, I have a say, but this is going to come down to what the doctors think. And the doctors decide whether he's, you know, available to get hit by other players and whether he's going to have contact drills or not. And Dan, look, this is the only – I wrote about this in Football Morning in America this morning that honestly, when you think about this, just think about it, the Eagles want this guy to be their quarterback for the next 15 years. They want him to be the centerpiece of their team, like the Patriots have Tom Brady being the centerpiece of his team. And, you know, the guy has not been touched by another football player since he dove into the end zone at the LA Coliseum and wrecked his knee. And so, I mean, that's almost 9 months. So are you telling me that given all those things, that you think that the Eagles would put him out in 10 days after not being touched by another human being? I find it very, very hard to believe that.
All right, here's what I will say to that, just to cut Peter off right there. A couple years ago in the preseason, you remember, now this is kind of different circumstances because he wasn't coming off an ACL injury, but he got injured in the first game, his rookie season against Tampa Bay in the preseason, didn't play the rest of the preseason. Week 1 came around, and he looked pretty damn fine. But I can understand what Kings say, well, you're just going to throw him out there. But at the same time, I mean, whenever Wentz is going to play, he's going to be, I guess you're going to be, well, not necessarily you're going to get rust out of him, but, you know, it's going to be 9-10 months before he actually plays. So, I don't know. We'll see.
He'll play the first week or two. I think it's more realistic to think about him against Indianapolis in week 3 at home. It's almost a friendly. You know, you're not really playing a tough defense and probably not going to face a tremendous amount of pressure. In my opinion, just a guess, that would.
Now, there is something to that. The offensive line again, all right? So the first half, the last 2 games, they've allowed 8 sacks. Only 2 in the postseason. If that line looks like they've looked in the preseason, Carson Wentz is going to get trotted out there and get massacred, and get annihilated. That O-line needs to get better quickly. That's the first thing. That's the biggest thing right now. The O-line needs to get shored up. It's supposed to be the best unit in the league. I would think that they will, but right now they're struggling.
Be what I would aim for if I were thinking the Eagles.
Yeah, I don't know why there's this big rush, and like you said, you want him to be there for the next 10 to 15 years. For more Dan Patrick
110%. That's what it comes back to. All right, so those are kind of my thoughts, just kind of rambling about a bunch of different things that are on my mind. So that's it. I think I got everything off. All right, I'm Adrian Fedkiw. I'm out. See ya.